Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draws are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. Remember, when you become a member of GoHunt.com/insider, you're going to get a $50 gift card to Go Hunt Gear Shop. What's in the gear shop? The best gear that you can buy for hunting the West. All in all, if you're hunting out West in 2018, GoHunt.com/insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, and we're heading to Pennsylvania today, and we're going to meet up with Clint Campbell. Now, Clint is the host of Truth from the Stand, Whitetail Deer Hunting. Clint, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Bruce? Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Hey, I'm excited to talk to a fellow whitetail podcaster because there's a few of us, and then every day there's more. I know that, but out in PA, how'd your hunt season go last year?
It was good. It was, Pennsylvania is one of those states, man. It's tricky. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of hunters. It was funny. I was just talking to a buddy of mine before we started our record here. Just for some context for those out there listening, if you're talking about the Midwestern states of like Iowa, for an example, which people think is a big hunting state, right? Especially deer culture. They have, I think the number is right around 67, maybe 70,000 archery hunters in Iowa. And the number of bow hunters or archery hunters in Pennsylvania is 300,000. So just to kind of put that into perspective of how many hunters there are. Yeah. And so it's a big hunting heritage state. And then if you go into, just including rifle season or gun hunters as well, you get up close to around 900,000 deer hunters in Pennsylvania. So hunting in PA can be some tough sledding. I was pretty fortunate this year. I was, I'd been chasing one particular buck for 2 years. I had 3 years worth of trail camera pictures of him, and I hunted him late last season. I did 4 sets for him, saw him 3 times during late season because he goes nocturnal mid-October, usually through the rut and into late season. And I did my first set of the season on the opening weekend. There's a cold front that blew through that opening Saturday, and I went and did a set for him because it was good weather, had the right wind. And sure enough, I saw him on that first set. I knew where he was bedding. I thought I was going to get a shot opportunity at him. He came to about 30 yards behind some brush. He's with a group of deer. He backed one of the deer came up underneath my stand. Got a little nervous. I think the wind shifted on me, and he caught a little whiff of something that he didn't like. He turned around and just started walking away. And then the deer that I'd been hunting, that I called Lucky, walked and followed him down the ridge. So that was the last I saw of him. And then I ended up going out on a hunt that was my family farm back home, about 240 acres. We do a little bit of habitat work back there and stuff. So it's a good time hunting back there. But then I live around Pennsylvania, and that farm's out towards Pittsburgh. So it's a couple hours for me to travel. And it was on a weekend, and weather wasn't right for me to go back and hunt Lucky. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out to a buddy's place. His family's got just like 3 acres, a small parcel up against some public land here in Eastern PA. I was like, I'm going to go out there. And I was like, I've been kind of stressing out over that deer back at the family farm. I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to leave all the camera recording equipment at the house today. I'm not going to take anything. I'm just going to go out and enjoy myself in the timber. And if a deer comes by that gets my heart rate going and gets me excited, I'm going to let one rip, and that was kind of my motto, thinking in my mind that I'm probably not going to see anything. Right. So I go and I crawl into the stand. It was only the second time I've ever been on this property. Found the tree that I wanted to get into, got into it. It was the worst climb ever, Bruce. I got in, my tree stand was crooked. I went to pull my bow up. My toe string got wrapped around my arrows and ripped half my arrows out. I had one arrow in my quiver when I got my bow up to me.
This is going bad.
Oh, it was going bad from the start. And so I got in the tree, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I was like, this is possibly, and my tree stand was crooked. It was uncomfortable. I was like, this is possibly the worst climb ever. And I was like, you know what, whatever. It's just an evening hunt. It's a couple hours. I'm probably not going to see anything. Whatever. Had this little spike come walk up front of me about 8 yards, just kind of milling around. I watched him, and he took off and, left after he messed around in front of me for about 15 minutes. And about 20 minutes later, I hear something jump out of the brush off to my right, and out jumped this nice Pennsylvania 8-point. And for a minute, I thought about letting him walk, and he was about ready to kind of break to his left and give me a 20-yard shot. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I told myself, if he goes left, I'll let him walk. And I was like, but if he walks out in front of me and follows the path of that younger deer that came out 20 minutes earlier, I was like, he's going to be at 8 yards. I was like, and I got to take the shot. And sure enough, he walked right out in front of me at 8 yards. I let it rip, and that was like the third week of October. So I've been tagged out since like October in Pennsylvania. That was the first time for me that it's ever happened that early. So I was super stoked to wrap my tag around that buck and get it done that early in the season. Then I set my sights on Ohio then, because at that point I was getting ready to go to Ohio for the rut.
So let's take some cliff notes from this. One, you just said, hey, I'm just going to go out and hunt. Forget all the other stuff, the self-filming and everything. I'm going to put that aside. Yeah. One, it's technically, you've already been on this piece of property twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, was this public land or private land, or tell us about that?
Yeah, so my buddy's family owns just a couple acres. It's 3 acres in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, and there's a big piece of state forest that their property butts up against. And so they have that small piece of property, and then if you cross like just their little wood lot at the back end of it, you're into the public land. And where I was sitting was basically on the property line between the public land and where their property kind of ends. And it's a creek bottom area that's just really, it's eastern PA, so it's low lying like eastern PA is. There's not a lot of terrain necessarily. Certain areas you get some ridges and stuff, but it's kind of, I won't go as far as to say it's swampy, but it stays moist for the most part of the year. So there's a lot of undergrowth. It's a lot of vines. It's one of those places when you walk into, just kind of, you think it looks bucky. You know what I mean? Like when you walk in, you're like, this just looks like a place where a buck would want to live, Yeah, and it was only the second time I'd been there. I hunted it one day late season last year. I did one set on it, and I had a nice PA 8-point walk up on me there. I think it was the last Saturday of the season, or of bow season. And I drew back on him, and he heard something move in my bow. So like the carbon of my bow rolling across my rest made a little screeching sound because it was so cold out. And I usually would lube it every evening before I go out to make sure it didn't happen. I didn't do that evening. When I drew back, he heard it and busted me. So it was my second sit on that property in 2 years, and both times I had 8 points walk out in front of me. So it's one of those things. It's funny. I wanted to kind of we can kind of talk about it if we want, but I had a bunch of really good sits going back to last year's rut. Even it's like where I got into a bunch of deer in Ohio, and I had a couple nice shot opportunities and killed a nice pope and young deer on public land in my third sit. I scouted it that summer before for one day, and walked back on it in November, and put an arrow in a nice deer and had deer all around me that whole trip. And then and then this year I had that kill at the beginning of the year, and then I was hunting that deer lucky, and I kept seeing him every sit I had for him. It was one of those things, man. It's like where every time I went to do a sit, I was seeing bucks, and I was always seeing the buck that I wanted to see. So you kind of start to get this feeling, like, I won't go as far as to say, and I would never say it's like you got it figured out. But you start getting this feeling of like, okay, things are starting to make sense for me. Like I'm walking into the woods and I'm assessing my terrain. I'm looking at my topo. I'm figuring out where my pinch points are, where my funnels are at. I'm reading the sign when I get into the timber, and I'm picking the right tree and I'm getting into the right spots, and I'm constantly seeing deer. So you start feeling like you got the mojo a little bit, you know what I mean? And then this year during the rut, I went to Ohio, and it was just like I got kicked square in the groin. I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? It's like where you feel pretty good about yourself. If you go back even, earlier this fall, it's like I went to Montana, and we got into some bulls, and I was at full draw on a nice bull, and I saw another really nice bull that I had an opportunity at, and I was at full draw on 2 different mule deer. And so it was just like all the hunts I had for almost like a year. It was just I was into the chips. I didn't necessarily always kill, but I was in the money. And then I went to Ohio this year, and it was just like getting punched in the face for 9 days.
You got schooled, that's all.
Yeah, I got whitetail schooled, that's for sure. I mean, we went to an area that has low deer density. We knew it, but the age structure is really good. It's public land, about 65,000 acres, big woods, no ag fields anywhere. It was all clear-cut timber in certain places, so you want to kind of hunt the cuts. And we had cameras out. We went down there during the summer and did some scouting and put cameras out and spent a day there scouting. And we had good deer on camera. We had, I want to say we probably had three, maybe at least 4 deer that we had that were anywhere between 140 and mid 160s. So we had really good deer on camera, especially for public land, and the age structure in that area was just really good. You're just not going to get run over by deer. So you might sit for 3 or 4 days and only see one deer, but it's probably going to be a pretty decent one. And they were all over the camera until we got there. And it was almost like we showed up like a week late, because as soon as we got there, it dried up. And now again, it's like I saw 3 deer the whole trip, and they were all bucks. You know what I mean? They weren't the ones I wanted to draw back on though. So
Let's go back to the PA hunting where you got that nice buck. And so second time in the woods, in the timber, as you say, then how did you figure out where to put your stand? I know the stand went up convoluted and crosswise and almost upside down, but you had to pick a tree, and you had to pick an angle, and you had to pick a direction. There was a lot of things you had to pick to set that up. So talk us through how that happened, because it wasn't by chance. You just didn't go up and throw your stand up. I know that.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I looked at the map, and the year before when I hunted that late season set, I did walk the edge of that property real quick, because I wanted to get a lay of the land and see what was going on. And as I walked through there was one area where I just saw a bunch of sign, and I saw a bunch of trails just kind of converging. Right. So there was no trees really around to get into. There was one really crooked, nasty tree, and I was like, well, if I was going to come back in here and hunt, I was like, it was going to be that tree. I was like, I'd probably want it to be on an east wind. I was like, because just to the west of that tree would be like a neighbor's yard, literally, probably only like maybe 150 yards. So I'd want my scent blowing into that, because I felt like anything to my east would be where deer would bed potentially, because it was just really nasty thick. So that was kind of my plan walking in. It's like I would like to say that I had a lot more thought into it other than that, but I knew I kind of wanted to hunt on an east wind. I had a good wind that day when I walked in, went to set my stand up. I did get all sweated up. The wind cooperated with me, fortunately, because it was one of those kind of warm October days. I want to say it was probably like 68, 69 degrees, getting close to 70. So it wasn't like your typical nice, cool hunting fall weather. I knew what direction I thought the deer were going to come from. I thought they were going to come from my right. I don't do a lot of trimming of trees when I get into a tree. I usually try to opt for cover versus shooting lanes. I usually just kind of live with the shooting lanes that I'm going to have. And that was really the key for that spot. That tree had a lot of really good cover, a lot of really good breakup. October still had a lot of foliage on the trees. So when I got in there, I really kind of had an assassin's perch. There wasn't anything that was going to bust me in there unless they got completely downwind of me. And by that time, if they did that, the only way they were going to get downwind of me, they're going to have to give me a shot opportunity. So that was kind of the setup for that tree, and it just kind of all came together. It's one of those odd things where you kind of survey all the information that you have, and you make the best choice that you can. I think one of the things that I've learned, at least in the recent years, is that, I used to be a guy that had paralysis by analysis, where it's like I would get so much data and so many, data points, and I would try to put the puzzle pieces together, and I'd drive myself crazy, and I would inevitably make the wrong choice. And so I started, probably in the past 2 years, I started trusting my gut and my instinct a lot more than I had in years past. So, I'm looking for a good wind. I'm not necessarily always looking for the perfect wind or the 100% right wind. That's just my personality. I'm willing to take a little more risk than most guys probably. And I knew I wasn't going to hunt this piece of property again, probably I didn't go back to it till the last Saturday of the season. So, toward the end of January. So I wasn't really too concerned about, boogering it up, if you will. You know what I mean? So I was going to kind of throw a Hail Mary pass. I was going to go for broke and be a little bit aggressive, and it worked out. So you can't complain.
No, and listeners, there's a lot of great things that Clint just shared with us. And the thing that you want to remember is the last part of what he just said, go to his gut, because every single one of you out there sort of kind of know where deer are, sort of kind of know where they're going to bed food and get water. But then you got to figure out, okay, what do I have to do so they're going to come 30, no more than 40 yards or less, to you. And so, following your gut and the instincts, that's worked for me in the past, in a lot of different hunts, just like, first time out in Colorado bow hunting for elk. No, I didn't get one, but I was on top of them.
Yeah.
They schooled me, and that's okay, because I wasn't 50 yards from this bedded bull, and I'm not that good. I just figured out what I needed to do and went and hunted. Your thoughts on that, Clint?
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, I had the least amount of success, I think, probably as a hunter, whenever I would try to pay attention to every single data point. Because I'll usually run a fair amount of trail cameras, and in this property, I had no trail cameras. A lot of times I do, for the most part, I do a fair amount of scouting too, at least when I can. Some of the out of state stuff I don't get to scout as much, but I'll put some boots on the ground. This one I took one quick walkthrough that probably took me all 30 minutes to do a walkthrough of this property, almost a full year beforehand. Your eyes don't deceive you. I think, I try to think of, not to sound kind of corny or cliche, but, if you think of yourself as a predator, and if you were hunting to eat, for survival, right? Or, to feed your family or to feed your young or whatever the case is. If you think of it that way, it's like, don't try to outsmart yourself. Put yourself in the best position where you think you're going to see deer, right? Find that spot, and that's probably a good enough spot. I will pay more attention to specific data points if I'm hunting a specific deer. So for example, that deer Lucky I was hunting on the family farm. Now that was something where I had spent 2 years watching him. I had 2 years worth of trail camera data on him. I had a couple visual sightings of him. I had sightings of him when I was glassing. So I had a pretty good history with that deer, and I had a pretty good idea what he was doing. So then I was able to kind of make a strategic move on him and put myself in the right position. Just didn't, the shot opportunity just didn't come to fruition. So I think it's really kind of taking each instance for what it is. Don't try to make more. Don't try to give the data that you have any more relevance than it should be given. And sometimes if you have to go in with limited information, that's okay too. Sometimes that can be refreshing. I think it's actually a little bit liberating when you don't have all the information, because then you're just going on purely on your woodsmanship, your instinct, your gut, and just being a predator. And I think that for me, it's kind of trending in a way that whenever I do that, I have my best hunts, the best success, and ultimately make the best memories, and usually are the most fulfilling hunts too.
Yeah, I like what you said. And we were talking about ebooks in the warm up. Be a predator. That's a nice title for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and I can't lie. I took that. That was something that I really started embracing, I think, last year more so. And then I really embraced it whenever we went to Montana, or when I went to Montana, because I got some great hunting buddies. My buddy, Luke Scheimer in Montana, this guy, Matt Eagleson, he's been on my podcast, the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting podcast before. And then my cousin Buddy, these guys are some hardcore hunters that get after it, and that's kind of their mindset, is that they, Luke, and Matt really kind of embody that. And that was kind of what I picked up from them. It's like when they hit the timber, man, they're in predator mode. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how they operate. And it was a good thing for me to kind of pick up, because it took, I was able to start to kind of, you and I were talking, like you said, before we started recording, about, what I do for a living as far as like, marketing and stuff like that. And I get into like digital in data analytics and stuff like that. And so it allows me to kind of meld the two sides of me that I really enjoy, which is like the primal predator side of me. And I like to train hard and hunt hard and stuff like that. But then there's this other side of me that I really like to embrace, which is like the analytical and kind of like thoughtful side. And so for me, it's like when I'm able to kind of put those two pieces together in the right combination is when I have the best success, but it's also when I feel the most fulfilled. And so that's what I've been able to do, I think, over the past 2 years, more so than in previous years. And it's paid off with the sightings that I've had, and the deer I've been able to put on the ground, the meat I've been able to put in the freezer. So, I'm more than pleased.
Well, where does the magician part of your life fit in? You had the digital world, the hunting,
yeah,
the primal world. Now, where does that go?
So that guy, we left him on the tour bus, man, because he just got me in trouble. No, it's funny because folks will ask me about it because they think it's kind of a little of a paradoxical shift, to go from being a musician, because they think of like an artistic kind of artsy kind of guy or whatever. And, I'm very much into, historically speaking, I was very much into music, and I do enjoy, art and, good literature and stuff like that. I don't read as much as I should. I do enjoy really good short stories, and I have a couple authors that I do like, but it's, for me, when I left the music world, there's a portion, or there's I guess an aspect of the rush or the adrenaline that you would get from being on stage, right? So for me, there was always two parts of music. There was the creative, very introspective kind of side of music, which was where, at least for me, was where all like the music came from, was all the songs and stuff came from, was me kind of thinking about myself and dealing with your own kind of, mindset and emotions and life and those types of things. And then there was the external side, which was like the being on stage component of it, which was like the adrenaline in front of the crowd and, getting that, that pump, and that rush. And for me, it doesn't seem as crazy of a marriage as a lot of people might think. I hunted all growing up, so it wasn't like it was something that was foreign to me. But I get the same feeling in a tree stand or when I'm in, hunting a bull. Whenever I see that animal approach, that same adrenaline rush I get when, as I did whenever I was on stage as a musician in front of 5,000 people. It's the same exact feeling. So it's like for anyone who says, I'd love to feel what it's like to be on stage. It's like, well, you don't have to be on stage. Just go sit in a tree stand and watch that, 8-point you've been watching for 3 years or 2 years or 2 weeks or whatever it is, approach your tree stand, and then you're going to get a shot opportunity. That's the same exact feeling. The reflective kind of introspective part is, hunting has a pretty deep meaning for me. It's one of those things where how do I say it? It's part of, I guess, my DNA. It's one of those things where I feel the most at home when I'm in a tree stand or in the timber. I don't, I have a lot of respect for the animals that I hunt, and I reflect on, the things everything that led me to the moment of releasing an arrow. And I just appreciate whenever I'm able to watch quietly and then, the animal's not notice, deer, elk, whatever animal I'm hunting doesn't notice that I'm there. And they just let me be part of their world for that 5 minutes that we're together, is really impactful. It's impactful on me, to me. And then the aspect of harvesting an animal is the gravity of that is not lost on me. And that's a moment when I like to reflect too. It's like, it's not like I'm sad or remorseful or necessarily because, I chose to make that move. I chose to release that arrow. But I think there's an element of gravity that I recognize that how much that animal actually gave and sacrificed in order for me to put that meat in my freezer. So that's kind of like the part, that's how I connect the two. That's how I connect the musician side of me with the outdoors side of me, because to me, there's not that big of a disconnect as most would think.
Now, did you write your own songs? Did you write a lot of your own songs?
Yeah. So everything was original, and, we had a deal and put out a record and stuff like that. So it was a good time. I got to experience all of it without self-incriminating myself.
Yeah, we'll leave that there. Leave it on the bus, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, let's switch it up and tell the listeners one about Truth in the Stand and why you started this podcast or the podcast.
Right. Yeah. So it's called Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere that you would find, usually find podcasts. And it goes along with my blog, which is truthfromthestand.com. I guess it originated as a blog initially, which was probably going on almost 3 years ago. I think it'll be 3 years this summer. I started the blog, and I was writing some articles, was enjoying that. And it was just one of those. It was a way for me, as I was mentioning, being connected to the outdoors is something that's important to me, and it was just a way for me to connect a little bit more deeply than just being in the timber during hunting season, or more frequently, I guess I should say. So I did that for probably about a year, and it was one of those things where, writing for me is really, really, really time consuming, because I don't claim to be the world's greatest writer. So it does take me time to research what I'm going to write about. It takes me time to actually articulate my words in the written form. And, I had a lot of questions about things, hunting related. And I was just like, man, it'd be great if I could get answers to some of these questions from some of these guys who I, read about or listen to, that are who I think are these phenomenal hunters. And then I just kind of thought to myself, I was like, well, if I have these questions, I was like, I'm sure there are people out there like me who have these same questions and probably are just a little too intimidated to ask, an uncle, a brother, or whoever, another hunter that they meet somewhere or whatever. I was like, well, I have I guess I should say I have a very high threshold for rejection. So I was okay with being the one to go ask the questions and possibly be told no. So, and I'm better, from my music background and studio background, I'm more comfortable behind a microphone than I am necessarily behind a pen or a pencil. And that was really kind of how the podcast started, was, just I wanted to get some answers to some questions. I thought it might be helpful for some other folks. And then the flip side of it was, living where I live, I was relatively new to this area because my wife and I lived in Florida for about 10 years, and we moved to near the Philadelphia area, and we didn't know a lot of people, and I definitely didn't know a lot of hunters. I still don't know too many hunters that are around this area, a few more than I did. It was just a way for me to also connect with other hunters. It was like I wanted to find people who were interested in the same things I was into, and it was a way for me to to start connect with a larger group and a brotherhood, really, if you will. And I've been able to do that. And I've met some great people, like my co-host John Mulligan. He's got the Arrow Wild TV show, and he came on as my co-host, and we actually met by chance at the Harrisburg Outdoor Show a year ago, struck up a conversation, hit it off. And then before you know it, it's like we're buddies hosting a podcast together and, and sharing stories and, just, what you would typically think of two hunters from different parts of the country meeting each other. So that was really why I started it. It's been a great ride. I love doing it. I love interacting with all the folks who listen on social media and stuff like that. I was just at the Harrisburg Outdoor Show and got to meet, a bunch of folks that kind of came by the Exodus booth and hung out with us, and I got to meet some folks. So that's always great. And it's always nice to get feedback whenever someone sends you a message saying that, they picked something up from your podcast or something that one of your guests said or that you said helped them this hunting season. And for me, that's the ultimate. It's like if I was able to help someone have success or a great experience in the outdoors and help, further their connection with the outdoors, then I feel like I've given something back then, I think.
That's great. And thinking about your podcast, if you had to, and this is really going to be hard, but if you had to take one podcast and say, man, that was so good of exchanging knowledge, just sharing the knowledge, not so much technique. It could be technique, but the one podcast, because I want my listeners to pick it up and go ahead and listen to it.
Right. That's a good one, man. That's a good question. I've never thought of that before. If I was going to pick one that I thought was maybe I'm going to cheat, Bruce. I'm going to give you two.
Okay, fine. You got to pass.
Right.
Clint, you got to pass. It's okay.
Right. Okay. From two different perspectives. So one from just a straight hunting knowledge, one that I learned a ton from is he's actually become a really good friend of mine. His name's Greg Litzinger. I just actually went back and re-listened to part of that podcast. And I don't listen to my own podcast very often. I'm not that vain. But Greg just drops a lot of knowledge in that podcast. He's from New Jersey. Some might know him on Instagram as the bow hunting fiend. But he's a buck bed hunter from New Jersey, high pressure public land, hunting a lot of swamps, hunting a lot of marshes, hunting a lot of hill country. The guy literally scouts every single day. And he just having conversations and text messages with him outside of the podcast, he drops a ton of knowledge, but being able to consider him a friend and be able to text him and, I'll send him pictures about things that I'm seeing and stuff like that. And he'll say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What's your wind in this direction? What's the terrain look like? And he kind of will give me tips as we kind of go. And that's hugely helpful. And he's also a great archer. He's won tournaments and stuff like that. And he's helped me a ton with my archery form and stuff like that. So not only was he a great guest, but he's a great friend and just an all around good dude. So if I was going to say choose one, I would definitely check that one out. And then
what number is it?
That one's podcast
and the title.
Number 23. It's called New Jersey High Pressure Public Land with the Bow Hunting Fiend, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
And then the other one that was one of my favorites is with he's a photographer and videographer. He does a lot of stuff with Jason Matzinger and Into High Country. He's actually, I think, I know he did a bunch of the videography for this next upcoming season. His name's Sam Soholt, and he does the public land bus that those that are listening might have seen in Outdoor Life, and he had a bunch of stuff on YouTube. And but that one we talked a lot about conservation. Sam's really big on protecting public lands, not just out west but everywhere. And he was one of those guys who felt passionately and deeply enough about it that he put his own money on the line and his own time on the line and built this public land school bus. And he drove around the entire fall hunting out of it and was in elk camp with Matt Zinger and sheep camp and ram camp and every kind of camp in that bus, filming out of it and stuff. And we were actually, when we recorded that one, he was actually in the truck with Matt Zinger because they were coming off the mountain from I think it was either the first or second week in elk camp. So that was a really cool one. He and John, my co-host, are good buddies. And he came on to talk to us about conservation and what he was doing with the public land bust. And that was really cool because for me, as hunters and, guys and girls who have any type of platform, I wouldn't, I'm small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but if we do have a platform and people are listening or they, read our written word or whatever, I think we have an obligation to make sure that we present ourselves in the right way and that we protect the things that we treasure and that are important, not for just us, but for future generations. And, Sam's doing all of the above in a real meaningful way. So not only should you listen to that podcast, because I thought it was a really good conversation, but I think, we should support him and any of the organizations that are supporting him and his efforts to continue to protect public lands.
Early today, I think it was Josh Honeycutt. He's the editor for deer hunting on realtree.com. And he and I got into this exact conversation about the responsibility of every single hunter, young, old, it doesn't really matter. And I call it, get in the game and do something locally. You don't have to do something nationally. You don't have to make a big splash about anything, but just do something. Get involved with the local conservation group and support those groups in your area. And if we all did that, we'd have a lot more recruitment, I believe, of newer hunters. And it isn't even young hunters. These are people 30, 40. We both know that women are the fastest growing segment of the outdoor world we live in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But we need to support all those people. Your thoughts on that, Clint?
Yeah. So, I mean, 100% agree with you first and foremost. I think that, I think we all have an obligation to do something. Even if you do something small, it's not small. You do what you can. I'm not saying you have to write the biggest check on the planet or whatever. It might just be going to help clean up clean up along the road somewhere or something like that, or helping go to one of these, watersheds. Around me, there's a watershed. They'll have watershed cleanup day. Go and do stuff like that, or support your local BHA chapter or your local QDMA chapter or whatever it is. I 100% agree with you, and you're right. The hunting recruitment thing is an issue. If you talk to the folks from Quality Deer Management Association, I'm friends with Ryan Fuhrer, who's one of the directors here for I forget what region. It's kind of overseas part of Pennsylvania, I think West Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, and so forth. We're actually going to have him on the show here in the next few weeks and talk about heritage a little bit, because that's one of the biggest things that's facing the outdoor community, is that we're losing hunters faster than we're replacing them. And I want to say that it's probably our biggest challenge, along with public land access. And if you don't have public lands for people to access, how do you increase recruitment? Because you need places for those people to go hunt. So the two things kind of go hand in hand. And the other part of it that I want to make mention of too is that I think we all need to make an effort to not only introduce people to hunting, but I think we need to make an effort to make sure that we present hunting in the best light that we possibly can to those who don't hunt. And I know that we live in a world that we don't want censorship. It's like we have the freedom of speech, which is one of the reasons why our country is as great as it is. We have the freedom to say what we want to say and post what we want to post. And but there's a consequence to those things, right? You have to be mindful that the audience that you're intending isn't necessarily always the audience that is going to view or read the things that you're saying or showing. And I think that's one of the big things that we need to be mindful of, is that we're presenting ourselves the right way. And that's as we were talking before the record, it's like I recently wrote an article that should be coming up here in the next issue or two of Quality Deer Management, or of Quality Whitetails, the QDMA magazine. And it's kind of along those lines of how do you make inroads with non-hunters, and that was kind of what the article is really kind of all about. I think I termed it venison diplomacy, and really kind of using food and sharing of game as ways to open lines of communication with those who are non-hunters. And notice I didn't say anti-hunters, because not everyone who's a non-hunter doesn't necessarily support hunters, an anti-hunter per se. They just maybe haven't had the correct interaction. And if you approach them with an anti-perspective, it already starts off from a negative angle. And so I would encourage those to approach it from a non-hunter perspective or a non-consumptive perspective, and try to figure out a way to open the lines of communication to have real dialogue to maybe change their mind. And that was what the article is about. In this particular instance, I was successful and made sure that we had another group of folks on the good guys team.
Yeah, and I'd like to call it just common ground. You just reach common ground with people, and then you go from there. And whatever that means to you, listeners, just find it with somebody who doesn't hunt. Not that they're in your face about you hunting; they just don't hunt. Maybe nobody ever explained it to them. Nobody ever took them. Said, "Hey, why don't you come hang out with me? We're going to go shoot a couple of ducks today, or whatever."
Right.
It all doesn't have to be big game hunting or elk hunting. It can be as simple as going chasing rabbits or squirrels.
That's a great comment there, Bruce, because you hit the nail on the head with two things that you said. So earlier you said that it's not even young kids in terms of recruitment. It's also that there's people that are in their 30s and 40s that would like to get out somehow, but just don't have anybody to take them. They didn't grow up in a hunting family. They don't have anyone in their family that hunts. They don't have any friends that hunt, and they would like to go out and try it because they have an interest in it, but just have no way to learn how to do it. And I have an example of that. There's a buddy at work, and to kind of piggyback off the second point that you made, which is like it doesn't have to be a big game hunt. He's shown a little bit of interest in, I've shared some game with him, and I've recently this past year took up goose hunting and duck hunting. And I was able to, bag a few, and he likes goose. And so I was like, hey, I'll bring you in some goose if you want. And he's like, sure. I brought it in. He's like, where'd you get it? And I was like, oh, I got it. I killed it. He said, oh, really? And I was like, yeah. He's like, wow. He's like, that's kind of cool. He's like, I didn't know you goose hunted. I was like, yeah. So we started chit chatting a little bit. And he's like, he's like, I like goose. He's like, I think, I'd maybe like to try that sometime. I was like, well, have you ever shot a gun? He said, yeah, I've shot, clay pigeons before or whatever. I was like, all right, cool. I was like, so you've handled a shotgun before? He's like, yeah. Goose season was over. I was like, if you would, I was like, if you'd like, is like, we can figure out a time next year during goose season. I was like, I can take you out and get you into a blind and see if we can, bag your own food sometime. He said, man, that'd be great. He's like, really? He's like, you'd take me out? I was like, yeah. I was like, for sure. He was like, we'll go out to one of the pit cornfields. We'll get in the blind. And I was like, and we'll see if we can't get you some goose meat. And he was elated that someone was willing to take him out. And the other thing that we can capitalize on is not just his interest, right? But the other, and this is an example of him as an example, but it's broader than that. There's a huge movement with people wanting to live healthy, right? One of the healthiest ways to live is to procure your own wild protein, right? And so if we can start to figure out in a smart way how to connect the procurement of wild protein on your own by ethical means as the way you provide yourself healthful food and nutrition for your family to those who that is the ultimate goal for them, then we already have an inroad or a bridge to have the conversation, right? So it shouldn't be a hard leap necessarily. But again, you can't go in with fire and brimstone like you have to love hunting. It's like, no, you have to figure out what is the context in which this person is going to be willing to accept it. And is there a way that I can communicate it? And if you feel like you can't, then find someone who can. You don't always have to be the person who has the conversation. It might be like, hey, I know someone who really wants to hunt or would be interested in it, but I don't know how to bridge the gap. Can you help me? And I'm sure you would be able to reach out to any number of hunters that you know, or hell, send me a message. You know what I mean? It's like, and say, hey, I need some help with how would I approach this, or how should I approach this? And I'll try to help you out. And if I can't, then it's like, I'll get a hold of someone at QDMA or something like that and say, hey, there's an opportunity here. How would you approach this conversation? Like we're all in the same team. We're all willing to help each other. So don't be ashamed or bashful about reaching out saying, hey, I need help in how to bridge this gap and how to figure out how to have this conversation, because that conversation, if we each have those, they build upon one another, and the possibilities are limitless if we do that. And so don't think that you don't play a part and that you're insignificant, because you're not. And everyone can make a difference. And that's just one small way that we can each do our part.
Yeah, well said. And I kind of laugh. Sam Ayers has a podcast, Living Country, in the city out in L.A., and there are organic people all over the place. And he says, I get the best organic food. You want to come over and have some?
Right.
And he feeds them venison or whatever. And they go, what am I eating? Well, this is 100% organic. There's no drugs. There's no nothing. This is free range. This is everything. And he tells them, and they go, really? He goes, yeah. Well, how'd you get it? I killed it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to dip into my marketing speak, it's like there's a consumer trend of a consumer health trend.
There you go.
We as hunters should be capitalizing on it. So,
and maybe you should write another article for QDMA or right. On that. No, because that's a big point. And people get it. Cameron Hayes is all over social media with his ability to go out and hunt and bring home the best possible meat he can. And there's thousands of people like you and I. When I get an elk or whitetail, we're eating it. It's in the freezer. And we're making spaghetti and lasagna and everything else that you can think of, because it's good for you.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, agreed.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah. I like how you gave me some writing work after I said I speak better than I write, but I'll take it as a task. Thank you.
Well, no, we're having a fun time here, folks, and we talked about whitetails and we talked about how important conservation is, and in recruitment, those type of things. And now we're going to talk a little bit about your gear and the things that your go-to gear. When you went to PA, you didn't have any cameras, you just had your gear. So let's talk about your gear and why it's all important.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it starts with the stand, especially for that hunt that I harvested that deer in. It was, I trust lone wolf tree stands. That stand specifically, I was sitting in an assault too, sticks and stand. I do a fair amount of run and gun kind of setups. I don't hang a lot of stands permanently. So for me, it's always hunting mobile. is the way I approach things. So it's either the lone wolf assault or it's the lone wolf climber. And in this instance, it was the lone wolf assault. I'm one of these folks where I'm perpetually cold, and so I literally have like almost a piece of hunting apparel gear for every type of season. So, there was one thing that I always kind of skimped on was the clothing I was going to wear, and I always paid the price for it at some point during the season. So now, it's I pretty much roll with Sitka gear. I usually don't leave home without it if I can help it. Whether I'm out west or whether I'm hunting here on the East Coast or the Midwest. That's usually what I'm using. Especially, I can't say enough good things about their rain gear. It's literally the first piece of rain gear that I've ever owned that actually did its job. So I've had plenty of pieces of rain gear that weren't so rain gear, if you will. And then as far as bows, man, it's like, this past year I was shooting a Matthews Halon 5-inch brace height. I have short arms, so I like a speed bow. This year I'll likely be switching up the bow that I'll be using this year. It's for the longest time I'd wanted to shoot this bow. Finally got a chance to, and it sold me. So I'm likely going to be switching to an obsession fixation for the 2018 season. Those things shoot super smooth. I got to shoot it at ATA and just kind of fell in love with it. So that was that. And then I use Ramcat broadheads. I've been using those for several years, and they're just devastating, man. And as I was getting ready to go out to hunt Montana, I was doing a lot of shooting at distance, out to like 70 yards, and those the Ramcats actually would land on point with my target tips. So that was really what kind of sold me on the Ramcats, plus the gaping hole that they leave. And then let's see here, what else I like to use. That I try not to take too awful much. It's like every year I seem like I try to take stuff out of my bag and everything kind of creeps its way back in. Definitely take a Wicked Tree Gear handsaw with me whenever I get into the timber. Like I said, I don't do a lot of trimming necessarily, but if there's one little, branch I need to get out of the way or whatever, I usually take a Wicked Tree handsaw with me and make sure I have that, just because you never know what you're going to get into. And then boots, I usually kind of wear a variety of boots. It really just kind of depends during the course of the year. Early season, I'll wear a pair of Solomon hikers, and that's usually what I'll wear when I hunt out west. I really like those. When it gets colder, I'll kind of slip into a pair of muck boots, usually for rut and whenever the cold temperatures hit. And that's about it, man. I try to keep it simple, not too crazy, and just try to take the necessities with me, and then let the chips fall where they may.
What about your practice? How much do you practice during the year with your bow?
Yeah, so I probably shoot 3 days a week. In the summer I'll shoot a lot of distance. Usually my summer regimen will, whenever the weather gets nice and stuff, it's like I'll start at 20 and 30 yards and shoot consistently there. And once I'm happy with my groups, I'll step back, to 30 and 40. And within a couple of weeks, I'll be back to 50, 60, and 70 yards. And that's usually where my shots will start to take place for the most part through the summer and into the fall. Right now, it's cold out. I'm not afraid to admit it. I don't want to go outside in the cold if I don't have to. So I got about 15 yards in my basement. So I have a target set up at one end of my basement. So I'll usually shoot every evening. I don't shoot a ton. It'll be 9, 12 arrows, maybe 15 arrows into that target at 15 yards. And for me, that's really good practice, because it's one of those things that the target's so close that you're not so concerned about your placement necessarily, or your aiming. I shouldn't say you're aiming. You're aiming. You're not so concerned with your aiming to where it's like, I'm more at this point just wanting to have a good release. I want the shot to feel good. I'm not super concerned whether I'm dead on with my placement. I'm just trying to make sure I'm holding my hover and making sure that the shot feels like it breaks good. And that's really what my focus is this year. Is it's more about just trying to keep my form and my technique in shape, and then that way in the summer I'll start working more on my accuracy and my grouping and stuff.
So let's push it out, come out my way. And so you're a PA guy, and you get some friends in Montana and your brother or a cousin or whatever. And all of a sudden you decide I'm heading out west. I'm going to go chase 800-pound whitetails.
Yeah.
Or bigger.
Or big. Yeah.
And so that was a good tell us the story of that. I want the background, because thousands of guys, I get emails every single week. Hey, how can I, gear up, and why should I hunt out west, and how do I hunt out west, and all those type of things. So right. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was just one of those things that I always wanted to do. I call them my adventure hunts. It's like I'll do, I try to do at least one, if not two adventure hunts a year where I go somewhere else. And then, going out west was always something I wanted to do. I'd been to Alaska before with my dad. He's hunted elk in the past, and it was something I always wanted to do. And I had an opportunity to go. A bunch of my buddies go out every year, and they invited me. And one of our buddies lives out there, and it was something an annual trip they kind of make. These guys are pretty hardcore, so I knew I was getting myself into quite a trip. It was 2 weeks. We were going to be in a canvas tent in the mountains, and there's going to be a lot of hiking, and so I trained pretty hard to get ready. I work out regularly anyway, but I kind of upped the ante to make sure I was in good shape to handle the elevation and stuff. And we got out there packed in, got into the mountains, and the trip started off really good. We got into bulls the first day, and we got into their bedding area and got onto 2 of them. We just couldn't get a shot opportunity. And then, this particular area it seemed like they were drying up. Like, my buddy Luke said he hadn't seen that much pressure there ever, that as long as he's been hunting it. And so it just seemed like there was a lot more pressure there this year than had been years past. And the bulls just kind of shut down on us, and the weather was hot the first couple of days, which probably didn't help. And then all of a sudden a big snowstorm came in, and the weather and the temperature dropped, and we thought that would get the bulls cranking, and it didn't. We put in a lot of miles. I guess I was probably doing, on the low end, I'd put in 8, and the high end would be like 15, so I was probably putting in around 12 or so every day. Finally one day we've ended up switching areas that we were going to, just because we weren't getting any action where we were at. I did have a chance to draw back on 2 mule deer, and just didn't get the job done. I lost light. I got drawn back on them. I had to put a track on for them or put a stock on them. And I ran out of daylight. I needed probably another hour of daylight to catch up to them. But so that happened. But we were really looking for some bulls. And there was this one mountain range that my buddy Luke was like, I go here every now and then. I don't go here all the time. But he's like, I feel like we should head over there now, because he's like, I don't know how much pressure it's going to have. And I was like, sure, because it's kind of a hard area to get into. It's a walk-in only type of place, so typically not a lot of guys. So we went there, got in. There was 4 of us. Luke and I broke up, went to one area, and my cousin and our friend went to another area. And as soon as we had to walk through like this dark timber line up. Once we got above the timber line, there was just like a bunch of sagebrush, and got through that, and there was like a little scree, like a scree point at the top. And once you crested that and got down over the other side, there was another kind of sagebrush area, and then into a bunch of dark timber. And then it was just like a big drop off. Like, it was nasty steep in there. And we got down in there and started bugling and started calling. And we got a bull to respond right away. And there were not just one, but we ended up getting 3 to respond. And we felt like the one right down below us, directly below us, was the herd bull. And we felt like the 2 other bulls were satellite bulls. And we called from that position for a little while. And the herd bull just wasn't making a move. And we could hear like he had cows with him. So we knew he wasn't going to go anywhere necessarily. The bull that was kind of like down to the right of us, he wasn't game at all. He split. I don't know if he thought he was going to get his rear end kicked by the herd bull or what, but he took off. He wanted no part of that. The one that was off to our right, like, he seemed like he was gamey. He was sporty. He would come in, like, we could hear him get a little closer, and then we would call to him, and he would back off. He was responding to cow calls, and like, he would only commit to like 80 yards. It was like the closest he would come. He wouldn't come any closer. And so we were getting close to the end of our hunt. We were there for 2 weeks, and I want to say, we were probably, I think we hunted for 11 days, because we had 3 days of driving and stuff. And I think this is like maybe like the 9th or 10th day that we were there. And so Luke and I were just kind of like, let's go for broke. So he was like, I'm going to call. And every time I call, when he bugles to us, he's like, we're just going to run at him, because he's like, he won't be able to hear us while he's bugling. And so we would call, and he would bugle, and we would run. And then we would sit, and we would call for a little bit, and he would quiet up, and we would, listen for him. And then he would make a call, and he'd be maybe just a little further away. So we would call back to him. He would bugle back, and we would take off, and we would run. So we did this for probably like 40 minutes, just trying to cut the distance. And we finally got to a point to where we were probably about, I don't know, I would say we got inside that 80-yard ring of his. We broke that comfort zone, if you will. And I think we got far enough away from where that herd bull was at. We cow called to him, and he was coming. He was getting closer. Now you could hear him. It's like, okay, now he sounds like he's like 60 so yards away from us. And so Luke lives in Montana. So he grabs me. He's like, hey, I'm going to walk behind you and set up for a calling sequence. He's like, you stay here. He's like, I'm going to try to draw him in past you. I was like, all right. So he's like, because I have the rest of the season to hunt. I don't need to get one now. So he goes to turn around to leave, and I just turn around and look into the timber, and I grab a hold of his arm, like, don't move. He's like, why? I was like, he's standing right there. He was 40 yards away from us. He'd come in like on a line. And so the bull's approaching us coming in, and I'm like, I'd never seen one that close before. So I'm kind of like, holy crap, this thing's huge. You know what I mean? And I'm excited, of course. And it was for a second there, I almost kind of forgot what to do. I was just kind of in awe of how big he was and like how like just cool of an animal it is. And so as he's approaching and getting a little closer, Luke was standing directly to my left. Like we were literally standing right next to one another, maybe like only 2 feet between us. And so there was a shooting lane right in front of him, and there was a shooting lane right in front of me, and he was kind of splitting almost the two of us, right? And so as he's getting closer, we're both trying to draw back, and he's maybe at 30 yards now, kind of splitting the distance between us, right? We both go to draw back. He picks his head up and looks at us. Luke's at full draw. I'm stuck in the middle, in mid draw. Like I didn't get my bow all the way back, and he's just looking right at me. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We're like 30 yards away from this bull. One of us is going to get a shot. I was like, and he's going to bust me because I didn't get my bow back all the way, and I'm stuck in mid draw. And I shoot a 65-pound draw, and so I'm holding all of it, like just trying not to move. And for whatever reason, he put his head back down. As soon as he put his head back down, I got the bow the rest of the way back. He made 2 steps to his right, which put him closer to Luke, and then he turned to his left to give Luke his right shoulder. And as soon as he did that, Luke let it rip, and he put it right through the 10 ring. I mean, he shot him once. He hit him. The bull wheeled, broke the arrow off, kind of strutted away, like limping a little bit. He didn't run. He didn't know what happened. He walked maybe 30 yards, if that, and wobbled, fell down, hit the ground, and that was it. Like he was dead on his feet. So when we butchered him, we pulled the heart out, and the arrow was still stuck in the heart. So he 10 ringed him, and that bull was dead on his feet. And nice 6x6. Super excited. I wish that was like the end of that story, but Luke didn't take a pack. I did because he said it was no pack Sunday. And he said, if we don't take any pack or gear in, we'll kill. He's like, just because we won't have anything to take care of it with us. And so I took my pack in, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. So we took some pictures and stuff, and there was snow on the ground. So we got a bunch of snow before that, a couple of days before that. And we got over, and it was getting dark out. And so we were like, you know what? It was nice and cold. So we were like, you know what? Let's get his hide off of him. We're just rolled off of one side of him. Let's take the front shoulder and the rear quarter off, and let's pack that out tonight. It's cold enough overnight that the meat will be fine. And so he was like, and then we'll come back tomorrow and finish the butcher job. I was like, all right. So he takes the hind quarter and puts it in my pack, and he's like, I'll take the pack since it's heavier, and I didn't bring a pack. I was like, all right. So I don't know who won this deal because I ended up having to carry the bloody shoulder out on my shoulder, and and he got the pack even though it was heavier. I think I might have rather had the pack. So I get my headlamp out now. It's pitch black out now, and I get my headlamp out, and we're getting ready to walk out. We take 10 steps, and my headlamp dies. So we're 2.5. Yeah. So we're 2.
No.
Yeah. So we're 2.5 miles in. We got a straight climb up for about, I don't know, 1.25 miles, and then a straight down another 1.25 miles. And I don't know what's worse. I think the down is worse than the up. And it was in snow, and we were pitch black. We couldn't see. We finally got back to the truck, and I wanted to kill him. But looking back on it, it was a good memory. So it's the kind of fun that you hate at the moment, but the kind of fun that you like because you like to tell the story.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple of things. One, conditioning. Just share with people, how arduous the Rocky Mountains are. I don't care what state you're in. I mean, it'll kick your butt.
Oh, yeah. So for me, I'm kind of a workout and health nut to begin with. So for me, I don't recommend anyone necessarily has to go to this extent, but it's like I really cleaned up my diet before I went. Like I eat clean anyway, but I went super clean where it was no grain, no sugar, no nothing for probably like 4 months before. That's just kind of the diet that I eat now anyway, as just normal. I do a lot of like fight training, so it's high reps, low weight, and then I did all my workouts. So I would do like Muay Thai and like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like fight training, but I would wear a 30 to 40 pound weighted vest while I did it. And then I would do my cardio as well, which sometimes was just high intensity cardio. What would be kind of reminiscent of like what you would do in CrossFit, and I would do that with a 40 pound vest on. And then I was also running like 3 to 5 miles. Also, and during those runs, I'd wear a 40 pound weighted vest as well. So that was kind of my workout routine. And I was in probably the best shape I've been in since I was a teenager, probably, if I'm being honest. It got me in really good shape, and I really didn't have much. I didn't really have any problems with the elevation and stuff like that. I mean, I really noticed it probably the first 2 days, and then after that, I was fine. And I think it was just because I made sure to pay attention to my cardio and my training before I got out there. And like I said, I don't think everyone needs to go to that extent. But just to give you some perspective, like the guys I was going out to hunt with are pretty hardcore grinders. And Luke lives out there, and he works for the Forestry Service. So the guy like kind of lives in the mountains, and he's a mountain man. And the guy runs Spartan races out there and just crushes people in Spartan races. So I was going out with a guy who is like, not only does he live at the elevation, but he also is a workout nut and runs like grueling mountain races and stuff like that. So I was with a guy who really had his shit together when it comes to his conditioning. So I, I needed to make sure I came back in one piece.
Yeah, well, you did it well, that's for sure. Let's
Yeah.
talk about shooting at 70 yards because, folks, you may have a bull comes out into a park. It's the low light, sun's going down. There is bugling, and you got them dead to rights, but you got to shoot 60, 70 yards. What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I was comfortable out to, my comfort zone was 65 yards. I was shooting pretty regularly out to 70 yards. If I had nothing but air and opportunity between me and a bull, I was comfortable out to 65. The reason I say 65 is because I only had up to a 60-yard pin, and I was confident in gapping 65. I was not as confident gapping to 70, just because I had so much drop in my arrow from 60 to 70. I could I could make that shot and gap that 5 yards, but the drop of my arrow, that additional 5 yards, was just something that I just didn't have a lot of confidence in. For me, it's you have to shoot what you're comfortable. I mean, there's some guys who wouldn't take a shot beyond 40, but I would say if you're going out west and you're going to hunt elk, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not comfortable out to 50 and maybe even beyond. That's just at least my perspective. There's a lot of guys out there who's more comfortable taking a further shot than that. That's just not me. I kind of cut it off at 65.
Thanks for that. So we're at the point of the show that your big, your big the one big thing that you want to leave with my listeners.
Man, put me on the spot a couple times tonight, Bruce. I like it.
Yes, sir.
I like it. A one big thing. So, well, one would be, if you have time and you're interested in whitetail hunting, check out the Truth from the Stand podcast. But I think the larger thing is that, and I know we didn't intend necessarily this to be the main topic of discussion when we set out on on our discussion, but, everyone can make a difference in conservation and making sure that we continue to have the privilege to hunt. And I think everyone just needs to be mindful that they can make a difference, no matter how small or how big. The public lands are important to all of us, and the ability to be able to access them and continue to have the privilege to hunt them is important to all of us, not just all of us currently, but even all of us who haven't started hunting yet, that for future generations. And I think when we make decisions about things, whether it's what we're posting, what we're saying, or the conversations that we're having, I think that we should just always kind of keep that in the back of our mind. That is this really helping the future of our heritage? Because to be truthful, there's 6% of us in the U.S. hunt. There's 94% of us that provide us or allow us the privilege to hunt. So I don't think that we should feel entitled that it's something that we'll always or should just be granted to have. We're provided this privilege by the grace of the 94% who don't hunt. And I think that we need to keep that in perspective.
With that, thank you on behalf of thousands of listeners across North America. Clint Campbell, this has been a great way to end the day for sure for this guy. And I just want to thank you so much for being a great guest on Whitetail Rendezvous.
All right, man. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate your listeners giving me the time and giving me their ear. And good luck to you this season coming up. And stay warm.
On this show, we're going to head out to near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and connect with Brandon Presley. Now, Brandon is a DIY public land mountain hunter there in the mountains of Pennsylvania. And he's going to dissect why sometimes within a quarter mile of a parking area might be the best place in that section of public land to hunt. You're going to be surprised what you're going to hear, and his success in areas that nobody else is hunting. They're just walking by, but there's deer there, and he's going to tell some stories about how he found a run of scrapes and was able to take a darn fine Pennsylvania buck using his tips and techniques and strategies that puts him right where the big bucks roam in Pennsylvania. And all of us know it's hard hunting mature bucks in Pennsylvania. A lot of people, over 900,000 people, close to 1 million people are hunting throughout the season in Pennsylvania. So to consistently take a buck with a bow and arrow on public land is a big chore. But Brandon has figured out how. Listen to his show, folks.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.